OK, next, though, Iran and the UN atomic watchdog have failed to find a way out of the stalemate over Tehran's nuclear programme at fresh talks. The meeting took place amid reports that Iran's installed more uranium enrichment machines at one of its facilities. With me now is Reza Marashi. He's Research Director at the National Iranian-American Council. He's joining us from our Washington, D.C. studios. Hi, Mr Marashi. Good to have you with us. Even before these talks, the IAEA was pessimistic about the outcome. With that in mind, what was the point of today's discussion, then?
I would call the IAEA less pessimistic and more realistic. I think the point is twofold. One, to make sure that the diplomatic process continues, at least on some level. I mean, Iran having conversations with the IAEA is at a lower level than it would be if Iran was negotiating directly with the United States or with the permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany. So it's important for some level of diplomatic process to move forward. But the IAEA is also realistic. They understand that the Iranian government is unlikely to pay for sins previously committed, meaning that if Iran did have some military dimensions to its nuclear program going on before 2003, as the United States and many other countries suspect, they're unlikely to, quote-unquote, come clean about those kinds of things until they're at the end of a negotiating process, so that, they feel, the Iranian government feels, if they were to come clean on these kinds of things now, so to speak, it would only invite more pressure, and it wouldn't invite any kind of rewards, or it wouldn't provide a pathway to a peaceful solution to this crisis.
As you say, what is the best way out of this impasse? Is it further talks to the IAEA, or is it in negotiations with that group of five that you've just been talking about, the permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany?
I think it's important for talks to happen on multiple levels. It is important for Iran to continue its cooperation and dialogue with the IAEA. It's also important for Iran and the permanent members of the Security Council plus Germany to continue their discussions, which unfortunately have come to a standstill. But the most important thing that has not yet happened is a direct bilateral U.S.-Iran channel of communication. We haven't seen something like this in over 3 decades, because what the United States often likes to portray as a conflict between the international community and Iran really is more or less a bilateral conflict between the two countries, and then you have the rest of the world taking sides or trying to stay out of it at best. So until that kind of direct channel can be opened up and be kept out of public view so that the spoilers can't muck up the process, I think we're going to continue to see more of the same.
As you touched on this just now, it's, I guess, a lack of trust on both sides. The UN is citing Iran's unwillingness to let inspectors into its Parchin facility, particularly as one of the main reasons for the failure. Why won't Iran let them in is the basic question. If there's really nothing to hide, to overcome this crisis of a lack of trust.
Well, I think, at least from the Iranian government's view, right or wrong, they see answering questions on the Parchin facility, which was suspected to have military dimensions prior to 2003. They suspect answering those kinds of questions as giving something and not getting anything in return. Now, again, right or wrong, you can disagree with that, but at the end of the day, the Iranian government wants to know what the pathway to a peaceful solution might be. They want that to be articulated. They want to know that if they continue their cooperation or increase their cooperation with the IAEA, with the United States, and with the international community, what are they going to get in return? And right now, that kind of endgame, a peaceful solution, hasn't really been articulated, neither by the Iranians nor by the United States or the international community. So I think really, truth be told, until the U.S. presidential elections come and go and the Iranian government gets a better sense of which president they'll be dealing with, whether it's Barack Obama or Mitt Romney, I think you're going to see them be hesitant to make any moves towards anything constructive. And I think Barack Obama has the same limitations in place, because no president seeking re-election wants to take risks that might adversely affect his quest for the presidency.
So as that extra time goes on, Iran continues to suffer from these crippling sanctions imposed by the US and the EU. How far do you think they are likely to go to push Iran to abandon its nuclear program, or is that kind of the end of sanctions?
Well, I think what's past is prologue, and if we look at the over 3 decades-long history of sanctions, we just haven't seen the sanctions, any kind of sanctions, really cause the Iranian government to change its strategic calculus. And the one time that it did was at the end of the Iran-Iraq War, where a clearly defined endgame was put forward to the Iranian government, where they knew that if they stopped fighting, they knew what they would get in return. They knew that bullets would stop flying and their international isolation would stop. There's no clear endgame for the Iranian government right now, so there's less incentive for them to cooperate the way that maybe the United States and some of their European or international allies might like them them to.
OK, just quick final one briefly if you can. Sunday, dozens of world leaders and the UN chief will be in Iran for a high-profile summit of nations which don't consider themselves allied to any power bloc. With that in mind, is the Islamic State not then quite as isolated as the West wants everyone to believe?
I think that's one of the inconvenient truths that comes from this non-aligned movement summit that'll be taking place in Tehran. There are 193 members of the United Nations General Assembly, and about 120 of them are going to be in Tehran with some kind of diplomatic representation, because that's how many members there are of the non-aligned movement. So, it's a great talking point to say that Iran's international isolation will continue. But if you look at the totality of the world, I think a large degree of countries maybe don't agree entirely with what the United States-led sanctions are doing and what they're seeking to accomplish. So it's a great talking point for the Iranian government. But I think 1 month from now, the non-aligned movement summit will come and go, and we'll see a very similar geopolitical picture as we see today before the summit has even commenced.
Gotcha. Reza, thank you. Reza Marashi, the Research Director at the National Iranian American Council, live from Washington.